Our first question today is, why do you think some people are denouncing Greek organizations?
So the question is, why do many people denounce their Greek letter organizations? Well, I will say this is that everybody's starting point is different. So some people join Greek letter organizations because they just like the letters. They just they like the colors, the letters. They just want to be a part of something bigger than this. Some people perhaps had actually a mentor, someone who meant. So for myself, God bless the dead Mr. Kemp, when I was in high school, was a Sigma. And they had something called the Sigma Beta Club. And so he did a great job of mentoring young men. So that was my entry point or introduction, I should say. A Marquise for those, and I'm still some of his thunder, but he's actually legacy. His father and his brother. So he's been around, Alpha all of his life. And so I'm sure that he got a chance to see, quote unquote, what an alpha man looked like. And then actually a lot of national figures are belong to different fraternities and sororities. And sometimes those are people we look up to as heroes and heroines. And then just sometimes just on our campus or campuses or in our communities, we see people who we say, you know what, I can see myself among them, or I like what they're about. So I say all that to say that everybody's starting point is different. So with that being said, I found that many people, as they go through the process, and when we talk about the process, is talking about the pledging process. And so I know that none of the Greek letter organizations condone hazing. Let me say it again for all those who are listening. They do not condone hazing. However, there are challenges and there are exercises and activities that one has to participate in if they're going to complete the process. And so, but I think that a lot of people, unfortunately, as they either mature, as they get older, perhaps for them, they feel like there's some inconsistencies in what they believe about the organization, about themselves. So I just kind of just tackle, and there's so many scenarios that exist. So, for example, particularly with those who become Christians. And so in Exodus, when God gave the 10 Commandments, he says that thou shalt have no other God before me. And so one of the things that we see is that unfortunately, there are times where there's people who make their fraternity or their sorority their quote unquote God. But I want to make the argument that there's some people who make their job their quote unquote God. They give more hours to their job than they do their family. That's right. You already know I'm about to call the roll, but I don't see people demand. I don't see
Clock
people.
it.
Yeah, I don't see yeah, my daughter, if she was here, she would do this right here.
Clock that T.
That's what she would tell me. But I don't see people denouncing IBM. I don't see them denouncing Xerox. I don't see them denouncing Apple or whatever company they work for. In the same breath, for some people, their relationship, or their boo or their babe becomes their god or goddess. And so I say all that to say is that I think that if you're looking for something to identify, to name as a potential God, I think that we find them all around us. In addition to that, I will say that we see some people who belong to our organizations who really so much of their identity is tied up in the organization. And so perhaps they may be a little bit skewed. And so that's what I found. And I know people who have denounced, they've attached it to their Christian faith and they saw that as a conflict. But I think it's possible to be Christian and still belong to a Greek letter organization. So that's a long answer to a short question.